I found him on the night I was supposed to die. The river had taken everything from the valley that season, and I had walked into the ash-gray waters believing they would take me too. My name is Seraphine, though no one had spoken it aloud in years. The healer who raised me called me child, and the wolves who sometimes passed through our territory called me nothing at all. I was an Omega without a pack, a girl without a lineage, surviving on the edges of a world that had made it very clear I did not belong. Marin, my guardian, had found me wrapped in bloodied cloth at the boundary stones when I was only days old. She was human, old, and stubborn enough to raise a wolf child despite knowing nothing of our ways. She taught me which roots could heal and which could kill. She taught me silence was safer than speech, and when she died in the frost of my 19th winter, she taught me that love always leaves. The river called to me that night. I had spent 3 moons alone in our crumbling cottage, eating less and less, speaking to no one. The wolves of the Vale Cerrado did not acknowledge Omegas without pack bonds, and the humans in the distant village thought me cursed. So I walked into the water, my thin dress dragging against the current, and I waited for the cold to make the decision my hands could not. That is when I saw him. He lay on the dry bank where the river had receded, his body broken against the stones like something the water had simply discarded. At first, I thought he was dead. His skin was mottled with burns that wept and glistened under the moonlight, and the smell that rose from him was metal and rot and something else. Something that made the wolf inside me whimper and claw toward the surface. I had not shifted in months. I had nearly forgotten she existed. But she knew him. Somehow, impossibly, she knew him. I dragged myself from the water and crawled to his side. His chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths. Alive, but barely. The burns on his throat were the worst. A collar of ruined flesh that told me exactly what had been done to him. Silver. Melted silver, poured slowly, precisely, by someone who wanted him to suffer before he died. I had heard stories of such torture, whispered among wolves who thought no Omega was listening. It was punishment reserved for traitors and kings. His eyes opened, golden, bright, savage with pain and something fiercer. His hand shot out and gripped my wrist with strength that should have been impossible given his condition. I did not pull away. I could not. Those eyes held me in place more surely than any chain. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Only a rasping, wet whisper of air. Then his free hand lifted, trembling, and began to move. Signs. The old language. The one Marin had taught me because she had once loved a wolf who could not speak. His fingers shaped words I had not seen in years. He has silver. Do not trust anyone who comes. Run. I should have listened. I should have fled into the forest and let the river finish what it started. But the wolf inside me pressed against my ribs, howling a single word over and over, a word I did not understand, a word that terrified me. Mine, mine, mine. I did not run. I hooked my arms beneath his shoulders and dragged him into the darkness, toward the caves that only I knew existed. The journey nearly killed us both. He was heavier than he looked, all muscle and bone beneath the ruined skin, and I had to stop every few paces to catch my breath. The forest pressed close around us, full of shadows and whispers, and I kept expecting to hear the howl of pursuit, but the night remained silent, as though even the wind was holding its breath. The cave was small but dry, hidden behind a curtain of thorn bushes that I had discovered as a child. I laid him on the bed of moss I had once used for my own escapes and began the work of saving his life. The days that followed blurred into a haze of fever and fear. I treated his wounds with the poultices Marin had taught me, grinding herbs by moonlight and praying to gods I did not believe in. The silver had worked its way deep into his flesh, and I had to cut some of it out with a blade I heated in the fire. He did not scream. He could not. But his eyes never left my face, and his hand found mine whenever the pain became too much. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his body fighting the poison that still coursed through his blood. Sometimes he thrashed, and I had to pin him down, my small weight barely enough to keep him from hurting himself. Sometimes he went so still, I pressed my ear to his chest just to hear his heart still beating. I talked to him during those moments, though I knew he could not hear me. I told him about Maren, about the cottage, about the river. I told him things I had never told anyone, secrets I had kept buried so deep I had almost forgotten they existed. On the 5th night, his fever broke. I was dozing against the cave wall, exhausted beyond measure, when I felt his gaze on me, clear and focused for the first time. I straightened, suddenly aware of how I must look. Hollow-cheeked, filthy, my hair a tangled mess of leaves and dried blood. Not the kind of woman who saved kings, but something in his expression made me forget my shame. He looked at me as though I were the first dawn after an endless night. His hands moved again, slower now, more deliberate. "What is your name?" I had to remember how to shape the signs. My fingers felt clumsy, unpracticed. "Seraphine." He repeated it back to me, his lips forming the syllables without sound. Then he touched his own chest. "Theron." I knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Theron Vaskara, the Alpha King of the North, the ruler of 7 packs, the wolf who had united territories that had warred for generations. He had been declared dead 3 moons ago, killed by rebels, the messengers said. His body burned beyond recognition. But here he was, alive and broken in my cave, and the way he looked at me suggested he had no intention of dying. "You should not have saved me," he signed. "They will come for me. They will kill anyone who helped." "I do not have anyone left to lose," I replied. Something shifted in his golden eyes, a softening, or perhaps a recognition. He reached out and touched my face, just once, his thumb brushing the hollow of my cheek. The touch burned brighter than any silver. "Then I will make sure you have something worth keeping," he signed, "when this is over." I told myself not to believe him. Kings made promises like other men made breath, easily and without thought. But my wolf curled inside my chest, warm and certain, and I knew with a bone-deep terror that I was already lost. The weeks passed slowly in our hidden world. Theron grew stronger, his body healing with the supernatural resilience of an alpha, though his voice remained silent. The silver had damaged something deep within his throat, something that might never repair. But he did not need words. His hands spoke volumes, and I found myself waiting for his signs the way flowers wait for rain. He told me of his betrayal in fragments, each piece more painful than the last. Kalen, his closest advisor, the man he had trusted with his life. They had grown up together, trained together, bled together. Kalen had been there when Theron's father died, had stood beside him at the coronation, had sworn an oath of loyalty that Theron had believed with all his heart. But Kalen had smiled at him over dinner one autumn evening and then ordered his guards to hold Theron down while the silver was prepared. The usurper now sat on Theron's throne, wearing his crown, ruling his packs with fear and violence, and the world believed their true king was ash and memory. "Why?" I asked him one night, the firelight casting shadows across his scarred throat. Why did he do it? Theron's jaw tightened. "Because I was going to change the old laws, the ones that say omegas are property, the ones that let alphas claim and discard at will." Kalen liked the old ways. He liked his power over those weaker than himself. I stared at him, something cracking open inside my chest. "You were going to change the laws. For omegas. For everyone." His hands moved with quiet intensity. "A pack is only as strong as its weakest member. We have been cruel for too long. I saw what the old ways did to wolves like you. Wolves abandoned, wolves broken, wolves who deserved so much better than what they received. I wanted to build something different. I did not know what to say. I had spent my entire life believing I was worthless because the world had told me so. And here was a king who had tried to burn that world down and nearly died for it. That night, I dreamed of white wolves running through endless snow, their eyes like amber stars. And when I woke, Theron was watching me with something like wonder in his golden eyes. We could not hide forever. I knew this. He knew this, but the days we stole felt like a lifetime, each moment stretched and shimmering. He taught me to fight with my hands and my teeth, showing me that my small size was an advantage if I knew how to use it. Speed over strength, he signed, positioning my stance. Precision over power. You do not need to overpower your enemy. You need only outlast them. I taught him the language of plants in return, which roots could heal and which could harm, which berries could sustain a traveler and which could stop a heart. We spoke without speaking, our hands weaving conversations in the firelight, and sometimes we did not sign at all. Sometimes we simply existed together, two broken creatures finding peace in each other's presence. I began to notice things about him. The way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when something amused him, even though his face rarely smiled. The way he always positioned himself between me and the cave entrance, as though danger might appear at any moment. He was protecting me, I realized. This broken king with no voice and no throne was protecting me as though I were something precious. The first time he kissed me, I was crying. I do not even remember why. Some small grief that had finally found its way to the surface, breaking through the walls I had built so carefully. He cupped my face in his scarred hands and pressed his lips to mine, gentle as a question. I answered with everything I had. "You are my mate," he signed afterward, his forehead resting against mine. "I knew it the moment you pulled me from the river. My wolf has known it longer. He recognized you before I did." "I am no one," I replied, my hands shaking. "I am an omega without a pack. I have nothing to offer a king." He caught my hands and stilled them. Then he lifted them to his lips and kissed each finger, one by one. "You are Seraphine," he signed slowly, holding my gaze. "You are the woman who walked into death and chose life instead. You are the one who saved me when the whole world wanted me gone. And if you will have me, scarred and voiceless and hunted as I am, I will spend whatever time remains proving that you are everything." I said yes. Of course I said yes. How could I say anything else? But our peace was borrowed, and the debt came due on a morning thick with fog. I had gone to gather water from the stream, the bucket heavy in my hands, when I smelled them. Wolves, a full patrol, moving through the forest with purpose. The scent of silver and violence clung to them like a second skin. They were looking for something. Looking for him. I ran back to the cave, my heart a wild drum in my chest. Theron was already standing, his body tense, his golden eyes bright with a fury I had not seen before. He had scented them too. "You need to go," I signed frantically. "The back passage leads to the northern ridge. You can escape. I can distract them, give you time." He caught my wrists before I could continue. "No, I am done running. I am done hiding while Kaelin destroys everything I built, everything I love. They will kill you. Then I will die fighting." His gaze softened just for a moment. "But I do not intend to die, Seraphine. I intend to take back what is mine, and I intend to do it with you beside me, if you are willing." The patrol found us before we could argue further. 6 wolves in human form, armed with silver-tipped blades, their eyes cold with purpose. The leader, a tall man with a scar bisecting his face, smiled when he saw Theron. "So the dead king lives," he said. "Kaelin will be pleased. He wanted to kill you himself. He has been practicing what he will say, I think. Something about mercy and weakness." Theron stepped forward, and even without his voice, his presence filled the cave like a physical force. The alpha in him had not diminished. If anything, his suffering had sharpened it into something terrifying. The patrol wolves shifted uneasily, their instincts warring with their orders. What happened next was not a battle. It was a reckoning. Theron moved like shadow and fury, his body remembering every lesson of combat, even as his throat remained silent. I fought beside him, using every technique he had taught me, my small form darting between the larger wolves, striking at knees and throats and the soft places they did not think to protect. We were outnumbered, but not outmatched. We had something they did not. We had absolutely nothing left to lose. When the last patrol wolf fell, Theron stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, blood dripping from his claws. He looked at me across the bodies of our enemies, and his hands moved in the dim light. "Will you come with me? To the end of this?" I crossed the space between us and took his face in my hands. I kissed the scars on his throat, the ones that had stolen his voice. Then I stepped back and signed my answer. "I will go with you anywhere. I will stand beside you when you reclaim your throne. And if they try to take you from me again, I will tear the world apart to find you." Something like a smile crossed his ravaged features. "Then let us go remind them what happens when you try to kill a king." The march to the capital took 7 days. Along the way, wolves who had remained loyal to Theron emerged from hiding, drawn by word that their true king still lived. They were few at first, a handful of warriors who had refused Kaelin's rule. But each day brought more. Old soldiers who remembered Theron's father. Young wolves who had heard whispers of a better way. Omegas who had suffered under the old laws and dared to hope for change. By the time we reached the gates of Valdris, we were an army. I had never seen the capital before. It rose from the valley like a crown of stone and shadow, ancient and proud. The walls were built from mountain granite, and the towers seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Somewhere within those walls, Kaelin sat on a stolen throne, wearing a stolen crown, ruling with the cruelty of a man who knows his power is built on lies. Theron did not send messengers or make demands. He simply walked through the gates, his wolves at his back, his mate at his side. The city guards took one look at his face and dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees. The dead king had returned, and he had brought judgment with him. Kaelin met us in the throne room. He was smaller than I expected. A wiry man with clever eyes and a smile that never reached them. He looked at Theron with something like disappointment. "I should have made sure you were dead," he said. "I should have watched the life leave your eyes instead of trusting others to finish the job. I will not make that mistake twice." He raised his hand, and archers appeared in the gallery above. Their arrows tipped with silver, their bows drawn and ready. Theron did not flinch. He simply stood there, scarred and silent, and let his presence speak for him. But it was not Theron who ended it. It was me. I had spent my whole life being invisible, overlooked, dismissed. No one had noticed me slip away from Theron's side. No one had noticed me climb the servants' stairs to the gallery. No one noticed the Omega until my blade was at the lead archer's throat and my voice rang out across the hall. "Release your weapons, or your men die with you." Kaelin's smile faltered. He had not planned for me. He had not planned for the worthless Omega to be anything other than a weakness to exploit, a pressure point to use against the king he hated. In that moment of hesitation, Theron moved, fast, brutal, final. Kaelin died with a look of surprise on his face, as though he still could not believe that a voiceless king and a packless Omega had brought him down. Theron took back his throne that night, but he did not sit in it alone. He pulled me up beside him in front of every wolf who had gathered to witness, and he signed to the crowd in the old language that many had forgotten. "This is Seraphine, my mate, my Luna, the woman who saved my life when I had nothing left. She will rule beside me, and any wolf who challenges her right challenges me." The hall erupted. Some cheered, some wept. A few looked uncertain, their old prejudices warring with their loyalty. But no one challenged. No one dared. Later, in the quiet of our chambers, Theron drew me close and pressed his forehead to mine. His hands moved in the darkness, spelling out words that needed no light. Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself, for seeing the man beneath the scars. I kissed his scarred throat, that ruined place where his voice used to live. You gave me something worth fighting for. I signed against his chest. You made me see that I was never worthless. I was just waiting for you. He held me until dawn broke over the mountains, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to belong. The seasons turned. Theron's kingdom healed slowly, the wounds of Kaelin's brief reign fading like old scars. True to his word, Theron changed the laws. Omegas were no longer property. Claiming required consent. The weak were protected by the strong, not crushed beneath them. Wolves who had lived in shadows their whole lives walked in the sunlight for the first time. I stood beside him through all of it. His Luna. His voice when his hands were occupied. His partner in every way that mattered. I learned to navigate the world of courts and councils, to read the politics in a sideways glance, to understand which silences meant agreement and which meant danger. The wolves who had once looked at me with contempt began to look at me with something approaching respect. Not because I was their Luna, but because I had earned my place beside their king. Theron's voice never returned. The healers said the damage was too deep, too old, too complete. But we had built our own language by then, a vocabulary of signs and touches and looks that said everything words could not. Sometimes I caught the older wolves watching us communicate across a crowded room, their expressions soft with something I eventually recognized as hope. If a voiceless king could rule, if a packless Omega could become Luna, perhaps the old limitations they had accepted all their lives were not limitations at all. On the anniversary of the night I pulled him from the river, Theron took me back to the cave where I had saved his life. The moss was still there, the thorn bushes still guarding the entrance. We sat in the darkness where we had first learned each other, and his hands moved in the familiar patterns that had become more precious to me than any spoken word. I have never thanked you properly, he signed. You thank me every day, I replied. Every law you change, every wolf you protect, every morning you wake up beside me. He shook his head. That is not gratitude. That is simply who I am trying to become, because of you. He paused, his golden eyes catching the faint light. You did not just save my life, Seraphine. You made me believe it was worth saving. I leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around me, and we stayed like that until the moon rose over the mountains and bathed the world in silver light. Not the silver of torture and pain, but the silver of new beginnings and second chances. Some nights, I still dreamed of the river, of the cold water closing over my head, the darkness that had seemed so welcoming. But then I would wake to Theron's warmth beside me, to his hands already moving in the dim light, asking if I was all right, telling me he loved me in the only language he had left, and I would remember that I had chosen life. I had chosen him, and he had chosen me. We were both broken. We were both scarred. But together, we were whole. And that, I learned, was the truest kind of magic.